So without further ado, Lori, you want to take it away?
I do. Thanks, Bill. Let me share my screen here. Great. So just to tell you a little bit about how all this started, mental health has become a bigger and bigger issue in our industry as you're working longer hours, bigger shows, fewer resources, more time pressure. It's really become a topic of conversation more and more over the last several years, I would say. And in 2019, we invited the executive director of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Dr. John Draper, to speak at the New World Ringing Symposium. And Bill and Eddie Raymond and I had several calls with him to sort of talk to him about what life was like in the entertainment industry, brief him a little. And he was very eager to talk to people in the industry because in the government statistics for suicide, they lump entertainment with sports and media. And for women, it has the highest rate of suicide of any industry and the second highest for men. So he was eager to talk to us. And at one point he sent us his PowerPoint slide deck. And he said, well, I've left a blank slide for you to put in all the industry specific resources. And we went, there really aren't any. And that got us talking. The organization that runs the Lifeline, which is called Vibrant, we knew they had developed programs for other industries. So we asked if they could help us develop a program for our industry. And they've served as sort of an unofficial advisor to us on this. But the first thing that we did was that we gathered together a steering committee made up of industry professionals, a combination of industry professionals and mental health professionals. So we have representation from all of the major industry assistance organizations that you're familiar with. So the Actors Fund, the Motion Picture and Television Fund, Music Cares, Will Rogers Foundation, NAFC in Canada, as well as therapists who are in private practice, who specialize in clients in the industry. And we started with a survey of the industry back in the fall of 2019, because it was really important for us to hear from everyone, what's going on in your daily lives? What kind of challenges are you facing? What tools and resources would help? And we had a tremendous response to it. We were blown away by the kind of responses. And especially, it was mostly multiple choice, but we threw in one open-ended, is there anything else you want to tell us? And people had a lot to say. And that was just a goldmine of information about what kinds of things people are dealing with and what would help them. So I'm going to talk to you today about those tools and resources that we've been developing over the last year. We have a 24/7, 365 anonymous peer-to-peer chat app, an online entertainment industry therapist finder, online behavioral self-assessments, easy to navigate resource links, a campaign to stop bullying, harassment, and intimidation, Toolbox Talks, and suicide prevention information. So let's get started. So the idea behind the peer-to-peer chat app is, in normal times, you're doing a show and you get home midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, and maybe you can't sleep because you got something on your mind, you got something bugging you. You're not likely to want to call and wake up a friend or a family member, and you're probably certainly not going to call and wake up your therapist. But what if there was a place you could go online and talk anonymously to people who understood what you did? So we have partnered with an organization called iRelate, which developed this at the request of people like special forces and first responders who also wanted a way to talk privately with people that they felt understood what they were going through. It's very, very easy to sign up for. You simply go to a web page and you put in your email and you download the app, and then you get an email back from iRelate with your login information. And as soon as you get in, you can set your username to anything you want, hence the anonymous. And once you get in, you want to go to the Comedy Tragedy Masks, because that's the be seen, be heard room of entertainment industry professionals. But you're also welcome to join what they call the global iRelate rooms. And there's a main room, and then there are sub rooms that deal in different areas. Nothing wrong with going there, but to find industry folks, go into the Comedy Tragedy Masks. And it works just like any app does. You put in a chat message, and if you want to respond directly to someone, you would put @ and their name or their username. But if you're in a good conversation with a group of people or even another individual person and you want to make it a little more private, you can invite them to join you in a private room and go off and have a conversation. So we really encourage people to take advantage of that. And now during the pandemic, when you might be isolated with people for long periods of time, it can be even harder to talk to them about what's going on. So it's a good way to just get on and let off some steam. And we're encouraging, if you're doing okay, you say, oh, I don't really need that, then get on and lend some support to someone who might need it. Because maybe you've already been through something they're experiencing and you can just offer some words of support that can be very helpful to them. So as I mentioned, one of the main findings that came out of the survey was how difficult it was for people to find a therapist who understood anything at all about what you do for a living. And people told us they were really tired of spending their first few sessions educating the therapist. And so we were able to partner with an organization that had run an online finder for many years, and they let us create a special finder specifically for people in our industry. And we did that two ways. One is we were able to look at and adjust the questions that were asked of the therapists themselves when they registered to be listed. So we could make sure that they, kept, that they would see people at hours other than your standard 9 to 5. Do you see people nights and weekends? Can you make an appointment online on your phone so that you don't have to be making a phone call backstage or on set? Those kinds of things. And we also then were able to set the criteria by which a therapist could register. And so we made it pretty straightforward. Either they had to have previously seen clients in the industry, so in effect, they've already been educated by those clients, or they had to have worked in the industry themselves. And we've discovered that mental health is a very popular second career for people in the entertainment industry. There are lots of therapists out there who have gone into mental health. So if you go to search for a therapist, there are basically 3 ways you can search. One is what we call a simple search, and you can either do that based on distance from your house, or you could do it based on state. And I would encourage everyone to do it based on state right now, because almost all therapy is happening as teletherapy. Doesn't matter where you are. What matters is if the therapist is licensed in your state. So expand that search for online counseling. And you can look at what kind of concern they specialize in. So maybe it's marital issues, maybe it's depression or anxiety or eating disorder or family issues, whatever it might be, you can sort of hone in on what you want. You can search based on insurance. We all know that most insurance policies do not have good mental health coverage. They often don't have very many therapists, and the ones they do cover are no longer accepting new clients. It's a big problem. If you find a therapist you think is a good match for you, call them up and ask if they'll work on a sliding scale. Especially now, most therapists are. So it's always worth making that call. In fact, a lot of them have a little pop-up box that comes up on their website, says, call us about, working with you on price. So well worth doing. You can also do what we call a more advanced search, and you can focuses on age group, what gender they identify with, what racial or ethnic identity they have, what theoretical approach, what their treatment method is, what kind of credential they hold. So you can drill down as many levels as you would like to find the right match for you. So Bill, I'm going to stop here. Oh, he's about to walk away. Sorry. I want to see if there are any questions on any of the first 2.
I don't have any questions in the chat at this time. So
does anyone have one? You can raise your hand and ask. No?
All right.
Okay, I'll move on. Excuse me. So the anonymous online self-assessments are just a way to check in on how you're feeling. A lot of us, particularly right now during the pandemic, we've been isolated for so long. We're all feeling things that either we've never experienced before, or maybe to a degree that we've never experienced before. So this is a way to check in on yourself or perhaps on someone that you're worried about. You can take these for someone you care about. And there are a number of different assessments. If you're not sure how you're doing, you can go into this wide range assessment. If you're not quite sure about pinpointing your feelings, but maybe you think, I think I'm suffering from depression, or maybe I'm dealing with too much alcohol use or a little bit of PTSD. You can take as many of these as you want. They're free, and they are completely anonymous. So we never know who's taken them or what your outcome is. All we get to see is at the end of a month, I can look up and see X number of people took the depression screening, and 80-something% of them sort of tested positive for depression. That's all we really get to see. We never know what your individual score was. So we do ask you a few demographic questions at the beginning because that helps us understand who's taking them. It lets us know if certain areas of the industry are experiencing more stress than others, that kind of thing. But then it's just going to ask you some really basic questions. This is for the generalized anxiety screening. Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having trouble concentrating? Are you getting tired easily? Those kinds of things. And when you're finished, it's going to then say either, hey, you're doing pretty well, or maybe it'll tell you that it looks like you are maybe suffering from generalized anxiety. And it's going to go on and give you some good information. And one of the things that we've learned is if you're having difficulty articulating what you're feeling, if you're having difficulty articulating, your emotions, taking one of these can help give you a vocabulary that you can then use to talk, whether it's with friends or whether it's a therapist. It just gives you a vocabulary to use to help describe how you're feeling. It'll also send you to some resources. And one of the things that our committee discovered as we were researching resources is particularly if you're in any kind of stress, you quickly get overwhelmed online because there are so many, and you just sort of go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. So what we did is we created a series of very easy to navigate, simple resource pages, one for the US and one for Canada. And you'll see just really basic topics. These are your hotlines, specific information on suicide intervention, anxiety, depression, how to find a therapist, those kinds of things. And when you go into this, you'll see really simple information. The best way to contact them, whether it's a phone number or website, essentially a 1 or 2 sentence synopsis of what they did, but you'll also see these icons. The first one says knowledge, and that just means that site actually provides a lot of really good information about whatever the subject is, anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. Tools means that they take it one step farther and they actually get into some skills building sessions. So whether it's for you or perhaps you're helping someone through it, it can be very valuable. So one of the other things that came out of the survey was how prevalent bullying and harassment still are in our industry. It was a really big issue mentioned by a lot of people. So we've been working on developing some material, and this is an ongoing campaign. We'll continue to add to it. And it's got a number of parts currently. So the first is that a lot of people don't necessarily understand that what they say or what they do is causing harm to someone else. So we wanted to make people aware of it. So these posters are available to download, and we've got the simple one to put on a call board of, wherever notices are posted. And there's a QR code that leads to the one that has really quite a few more examples. So the first thing is making people aware of the words and the behaviors that can cause harm. We have recently put up some information. If you think you're a target of bullying, what can you do? And so we've put up some information about that. You'll see some more detailed information than this. I just gave you sort of an outline. But if you do think you're a target, we encourage you to do that, to go there and look at this resource. If you think you are a bystander, if you have witnessed bullying and harassment take place, what can you do? How can you intervene safely? What are some of the techniques for intervening? So we've got that information is also on the website. We've got a basic sort of brochure, if you will, because we really think there are 4 key steps to helping stop bullying and harassment. You want to be informed about what constitutes bullying and harassment. You want to be aware of whether it's going on around you. You want to show support for the target, and you want to take action to help stop it. So we get into quite a bit of information under each of these main categories. So I encourage you to go and take a look at that. And lastly, if any of you are employers, we created a sample employer policy because a lot of smaller employers in particular don't have HR departments. They might not have the resources, especially right now, to research that. So we've done the research. We've created a sample template that they can use. Of course, they have to check what local and state and municipal law are in their area regarding this subject. But once they do that, they can then modify it to suit their needs and have a policy ready to go. So I'm going to stop for a minute, Bill, and see if there are any questions. You're muted.
I was muted, sorry. Yeah, I have a question, but I want to it's going to take us back to the find a therapist discussion previously. With that find a therapist, is that more for finding a long-term therapist, or is this considered a one-shot deal? What's the goal in that find a therapist?
It's really for finding, not a one-shot. It's for finding someone on a more ongoing basis. But I will say that it includes a large number of people. So it's everything from social workers, psychologists, wellness coaches, up to psychiatrists. So it covers a wide range of individuals. Okay. But it's really people you're going to want to go to and establish a relationship with. But I do want to remind people, if you try a therapist and you don't like them, go try someone else. Yeah. Maybe it'll take a couple times to find someone you're comfortable with. But it's really important to do that, to find someone you're comfortable with.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
Not at the moment.
Anything on? Okay. So next is Toolbox Talks. We want language about psychological safety and respectful workplaces to be a part of every workplace. And it seemed to us that the place to introduce that, most work spots are doing something at the start of a call, whether it's a toolbox talk, a safety briefing, I've heard it called a stand-up meeting, whatever it might be, you've got to cover some basic safety information. So let's introduce some language about mental health in there. And I beg you to start doing that as people return to work, because they are going to need it more than ever as people return to work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we know it's a tough subject to talk about. You're entertainment industry professionals. You're not mental health professionals. So how do you talk about it? Well, we've done a few things. First of all, we've created just a page that has some information about why it's important to talk about. And that's for you to use. Let's say you think it's a good idea to include, but you got to convince someone up the reporting chain to let you add that. These are the arguments you use to let them add, have them let you add some sentences about mental health into your toolbox talks. But then what we've done is we've identified important topics. And within those, we have various bullet points. And for each of those bullet points, we've created sample language. You'll find 3 or 4 sample sentences on each of those. And the idea is that you go in and you put together the appropriate talk for your workplace, because everyone's workplace is going to be a little bit different. So identify what the key topics are for you, and then get some language that feels comfortable to you. You know, it's really important, especially now as people return to work, that to let them know it's okay not to be okay, to recognize that. Acknowledge stressors and challenges in the workplace, whether it's because you've all been working really long hours, or maybe you're all out of practice because you've been off work and complying with the COVID safety protocols is not easy. Whatever it may be, you want to acknowledge all that. So, for example, here, one of the important things is explain why mental health awareness is important in the workplace. We've given you 4 sample sentences. Grab the one that feels comfortable to you. And if it doesn't quite feel comfortable, adjust it to suit your voice. It's really important that you be comfortable in delivering this language. So all of that is on the website, and there's even a Word document, so you can just download it and cut and paste the language as you want to. And if you don't want to go to that effort to put it together, then we also have some pre-scripted talks that we created. And you can go in and take a look at them. Again, they're available as a Word version. And you can say, oh, I like that one. I need to make a couple of tweaks to it, but that one will work for me. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible. And just to remind people, as people return to work, there's a tremendous amount that's going to be going on with each individual. We don't know what they've been dealing with. Have they been ill with COVID? Have they lost a loved one? Have they been evicted because they couldn't afford to pay rent? So there's a lot going on. But you also want to remember that they're essentially out of shape. They may be out of shape physically and probably out of shape mentally from a work point of view. That muscle memory of how to do a job may be gone. Things that they would automatically check, safety things that they would automatically check without a second thought, might not come automatically anymore. They might have to stop and think about that. Coming out of isolation is going to be hard on people and anxiety producing. I know I'm very isolated where I am, and when I'm around people at all, it's anxiety producing, let alone for long work days. Complying with all the safety protocols. And I'm talking to people around the country, some of whom are working, and I can tell you that these are real issues for people. So check in on people more frequently. If you're a leader, check in on them frequently and encourage them to check in with each other. It'll go a long ways towards helping people get back into the workplace smoothly and safely. Okay, Bill, questions?
It's going to be me again. If you don't mind, Lori, I'd like to talk about the Toolbox Talk just in a little bit more detail about the concept, because I think it's extraordinarily important, not only for mental health awareness, but in general. And I'm curious, I don't know how many of you will be willing to do this, but how many people on this call have experienced a Toolbox Talk either once or, maybe more frequently? Again, this would be, I'm assuming, pre-pandemic. I'm just want to get a sense for how many people.
I'd stop sharing so you can see everyone.
Either that or just throw it in the chat, folks. That'll probably be easier. Davin says, Broadway gigs. Well, it's good to hear that the Broadway gigs are doing it. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, as I say, I think it's really important. And I don't think it's happening as often as some of us think it is. I mean, I think at the management level, it happens, but it doesn't happen as often as I'd like. And I'd like everybody to try and get into a habit of doing this.
And Bill, I'm going to say this. We've always known that bringing mental health to the forefront in our industry is going to take a culture change, right, because of the stigma, no question about it. And these things, as we can attest, right, Bill, normally take 10 to 15 years to happen. What the pandemic has done, I think, has allowed this culture change to speed up, because almost everyone has dealt with some sort of mental health issue during this, whether it's some sort of depression, some sort of anxiety. People are more aware of how it can impact anyone. And I think it makes people more open to talking about it. And I think that if we can bring this back to the workplace with us, if you can start incorporating this language, if you haven't been doing safety briefings, do the safety briefings. We can speed up this culture change in a way that would never have been possible prior.
Agreed. The one other item that I wanted to point out that it's my hope, and I don't know whether this is happening at all or not, but that in academia that they start developing good habits during the academic process when they're loading in shows, when you're working on a set or whatever, that they develop toolbox talks there, so that when they come out of school, that whole toolbox talk concept isn't foreign to them, or at least it's not an embarrassment or something to be kind of shy about.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we can start this in schools, that would be fabulous.
Yeah. Tom has generally do 2 pre-show when the staff come in for load-in, and when the volunteers, cast, and crew move onto the stage from rehearsal hall. That one is always the hardest. If you don't mind, Tom, would you mind explaining why the one going into the main stage is the hardest? Check your mute, Tom. I don't have you on my screen. You're muted, Tom. Still muted. I don't think I can ask to unmute. I can't unmute you. I don't know why you're still muted. Now you're not. There we go.
We have myself and a freelance crew come in to do the load in. We have a volunteer designer who has designed the set. We generally go through both the safety talk and just what we're going to do and how we're going to get it in. We generally have 2.5 days before the cast and crew, who are all volunteers, move from the rehearsal hall up onto the stage. I have to determine whether or not it is safe at that point for them to come up. They may have walls but no doors, but it is very difficult, especially for me, to say it, because they all complain and say it's different. It's all different than it was in the rehearsal hall.
Right.
Yes, you've got risers. In the rehearsal hall, you didn't have risers. Yes, you have sets of stairs. Yeah. Now, we have not opened. We have done it exactly 1 year ago today that we closed, shut down. Haven't done a show since. The same set is sitting on stage. We're going to have a big culture shock, I think, mentally and, as you say, mentally and physically, when we move back in and start doing shows. And it's already difficult working to get them into that. We have 2 weeks for them on stage before they actually open for a 3-week run, 3.5-week run. But now I've got to add in that COVID, the whole mentality thing of, it's just why it's hard. I think it's hard. I guess it's hard because I'm dealing with volunteers, and I have a whole code of things that I have to do as an employee that are legislated, where they don't. That's what makes it hard.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And Dennis Booth is telling us they're working on it down at the UNCSA. Thank you, Dennis. That's excellent that that's happening. You're hoping other schools are following your lead.
Yeah, I would add that the COVID protocol has sort of provided a framework for this. So Lori, you're absolutely right. Just expanding into that as we come back to work, I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a conversation with a group of folks who do sports broadcast a couple of weeks ago. These people are working flat out right now because they work with groups like the NFL and the NHL, et cetera, NBA. And they were talking about the stresses of going back and working under the COVID protocols. And they are significant for people. You're going back to workplaces that look and feel totally different than the ones you left a year ago. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And it's important to recognize that things are going to take longer because of the COVID protocols and because of the anxiety people are feeling and because they've been away from work and aren't used to that. So everything's going to feel different and everything's going to take a little longer to get done. And I know we're going to be fighting, you're going to be fighting producers and all that kind of thing. Hang on one second, Brian. So it's going to be tough to get them to understand that and to buy into that. I think, Brian, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've done a little bit of work. I mean, mostly not, but every now and then someone will call me in to do something. And I work with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra here in town, and their COVID protocols are, I mean, most of them are pretty good. There's some other stuff that's in there. You can tell whoever wrote that wasn't a scientist and doesn't understand how epidemics work. But the gist is, you know, they are really trying to make it safe. And orchestras, especially, you know, when you get brass or any sort of singing, you're in, this is like a whole different world of potential transmission. And they were already neurotic, which makes them kind of hard to deal with because they're paranoid. Now they like are really neurotic. So like if I like crawl on the floor, because I'm an audio guy, if I crawl on the floor for these things and like try to adjust a mic or something, they look at me like I'm a giant cockroach coming to get them, you know. But it's like, so you have to like move slowly toward people, give them a chance to either decide they don't want you within 8 feet of them, or they're okay as long as you don't like hover over them. You know, that's the other good thing about staying low. It's like you can't, it's real hard to breathe up, but it's really interesting. Some people are very relaxed and some people are completely freaking out, and other people have no concern at all, which makes them actually more dangerous than everybody else because they literally aren't grasping what's going on. So it's kind of hard to try and stay focused on what we're trying to do without failing to do our job. You know what I'm saying? It is a stressor. It is difficult, like amazingly difficult. Absolutely. Actually. And I can't imagine how much better it's going to be. I mean, when everyone gets vaccinated, it'll be much, much more relaxing. But boy, for the first 3 or 4 months, it's going to be brutal. You know, I want to be back.
And if you're touring it all,
Lori?
Yeah.
Can you see Camille Petrillo's comment? I think it's an excellent comment that we might want to address a little bit. Do you have that?
Yeah, from the perspective of coming back to work, I think it is also really important that workers understand that you have their backs and are actively looking after their health and wellness. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And by you, when she says that she's talking about employers.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Just want
to. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so important. And it's one of the things that's of great concern, Camille, because you've got employers who are, you know, they've been struggling to stay afloat, right, over the last year. And so they're concerned about making money at the moment. And, you know, I'm hearing that some employers are asking, you know, they're hiring fewer people to do the jobs so that those that do get hired are working more than they ever did. And they're not getting that kind of, you know, we're concerned about you. We want to make sure you're okay. To speak to one of the things Brian was saying, I'm hearing if you go on tour, so let's say you're in a place that's really good about the protocols, but then you go on the road and you might get to a place where they don't wear masks, they don't care. And that's very anxiety producing as well. The one thing I would say is it's really important to take care of each other. Even if you have an employer who's not showing signs of caring, you obviously want to try to change that. But one of the things you can do is take care of each other. And that means checking in with each other on a regular basis to say, how are you? Doing okay? If you're, you know, if you're a crew leader or something, tell your people, look, if you find yourself getting really anxious, take 90 seconds, walk away, do some deep breathing, take your mind to, you know, your serene place, whatever it might be. 90 seconds can generally is all it takes to sort of reset the brain and reduce that anxiety level. So there are lots of little things that you can do for your for your team, whether you're, it's a colleague straight across the line or whether you've got people reporting to you. There are things you can do within the overall structural limitations of your sort of reporting chain. And I think those are important.
Yeah, and if I may, I also want to mention, and I'm going back to Toolbox Talks again. A Toolbox Talk isn't the supervisor, the steward, or the boss just doing all the talking and then you break huddle and go off and do your job. Everybody has an opportunity, or everybody should have an opportunity to talk during that little meeting, and that would be an ideal time to remind your coworkers to, if there are problems, you're allowed to speak up. You're allowed to talk about it, and it's helpful in those situations. When you're reminding your coworkers, it's also going to hopefully remind that recalcitrant boss that you've got that's not paying as much attention as maybe they should.
David, you had your hand up a while ago. I can't see everyone on my screen, so speak up if you haven't. But I know
You
David,
want to do we want to stay on the share or
let me stop so it's easier to see everyone. There we go.
yeah.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to do some scenic work for a movie back in November, December, and there was very much the duality in that the company had very strict COVID protocols. You had to fill in an app before you even left your front door, and it would give you a green or a red screen, and then you had to show that as you went through the gate. But then inside the doors, it was a real hodgepodge. And thankfully, I got to work in my own sort of little shop, and I didn't have to deal with folk too much. But it was still, there'd be some folk in, they'd pop in and they'd have the mask dangling from one side, and you'd motion because I wore my mask in the shop all the time, period, just because otherwise I knew I would forget. But some folk, and it really got awkward.
I'm hearing that from around the country, that there are people who show up to the call and they don't want to wear a mask, and maybe they belittle others for wearing a mask. It's a problem. It's something that I think people need to speak out against when they see. It's really important to be as kind, if you will, to others as possible and to take care of others. And I know it's very political, the mask wearing and all that. And you also have the issue of maybe you have to go through a lot of hoops, if you will, to get in the building. So you have to stand in line and get a temperature check, or you have to even get tested. But then I'm hearing lunchtime comes and you can go eat lunch anywhere you want and come back to the building. So yeah, there are no standard safety protocols, unfortunately, anywhere. And that's going to add to people's anxiety. No question.
Here's the other side of it. Then I ran across it on set, but I also run across it even just in the grocery store, is the redneck, and I.
Well, let's not get down. Let's not get political here, David.
Okay, but the Sky Friend follower, let's just keep it that way, who say, well, he doesn't want me to have to wear this. And I just look at those kind of folk, and in the workplace, I can say, doesn't matter. Here, it's the rule. But out there, it's like, oh my God, really? How do you deal with that?
You deal with it by you walk away. I mean, you're
not in the grocery store you can, but at work it's kind of really difficult.
Well, yeah, I can't speak for all workplaces, but if I'm in a workplace where they're not wearing masks, I either leave the workplace or at least leave the area where the non-mask behavior is happening. Mr. Young, you had your hand up earlier, and then we'll go back to Brian.
Yeah. Along what you were just saying and what David was saying, I was working in a shop for a movie, for a TV show back in November. You had to do the electronic pass to get it through the gates. You did get your temperature checked. You had to wear your mask in the shop. You had one chance to screw up or they would fire you. They're playing it for real, which was, comforting in that respect that was happening. I got a call the other day to work on another show. I would have to quarantine with the shoe crew and the actors. I wasn't prepared to go do that because I don't know how much time. They probably got at least a month or two of shooting yet to go in their production schedule. I wasn't ready to go away for 2 months. And that's what it would take to go back to work right now down here.
Right. Brian?
Yeah, I had 2 observations. One, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm kind of known as the skeptic person that if someone wants to try and proselytize at me or whatever and tell me how things work, I'm the guy in the crew that literally nobody wants to have that conversation with, because I'm not afraid of it and I'm not afraid to say what I think, and they don't generally like it. But that being the case, regardless, the one thing I've run into is you'll get on to people where, like, you can tell them, it's like, you need to get away from me. You're not masking. You need to stand back. Or I've had a guy who works in the venue I work in get on the elevator with me without a mask on. And I literally, as soon as he got on the elevator, I literally got off. And he looked at me funny, like I was being rude. And I'm like, get the F away from me, dude. It's like, what is wrong with you? So I don't know how you guys handle stuff like that besides making it obvious that you're not approving it. But I actually have 2 separate kinds of masks I wear. I have the regular blocking mask, like I see some people on here with, and, the ones you wear when you go to the grocery store or whatever, just the basic multi-layer fabric mask. And I have a couple of N95 masks. So if I have to be around people who are morons, I just put the N95 mask on, because at that point, I'm no longer trying to protect them because they're beyond help. And as far as I'm concerned, I just need to protect myself at that point. Okay. Because we know medically that the N95 mask, if I'm like an asymptomatic carrier, the N95 mask with the little exhaust valves doesn't protect anyone I'm working around. And I would rather not have to wear that. But there are some situations on a couple of work calls I've had over the last few months where I've literally had to go to my bag and get the N95 mask on because someone wasn't wearing their mask correctly or just wasn't wearing it at all. And after you talk to the building manager, I mean, I'm almost getting to the point if someone says, well, I can't do anything about it, I say, fine, I'm leaving. That's, I think, going to be my next call. Right. And that's a really tough thing to say. It's like, I'm going to walk off the call if you don't put your damn stuff on. Right. So, well, I mean, that's going to, I mean, either the employer has to deal with it or not. I personally am very happy with my employer. And this is something else to think about. He is a very, very adamant about people masking when they're within proximity of anyone else. And his attitude is, I don't want my venue to be, and the Fox Theater in St. Louis tonight was the hotspot for a COVID outbreak. That is literally not the headline we need for any of our venues. Right. So I don't know about the rest of your VP level people, your upper management people, but my upper management people are pretty aggressive about that one, because the one thing, and they've actually said no to jobs. They've said no to work, because if you can't control what people are going to do, then you can't control what's going to happen. And right now, I don't know. I think if you were a COVID hotspot, that could destroy your reputation to the point where people wouldn't want to go there.
Well, we don't want to get down that path. I think your points are well made. I think, folks, what we're talking about, and Lori, smack me around if you disagree, but what we're talking about, just in general, you have to stand your ground, but you need to do so in a respectful and compassionate way, even with those who may not, in your opinion, deserve, respect or compassion, because it's just going to exacerbate it if you try and do it in any kind of a confrontational way.
But I do think, absolutely, Bill, no question. I think Brian sort of makes a good, it's an argument you can use with whether it's an employer or a venue operator of, look, you don't want to be in the headlines as a COVID hotspot, and you don't want to have your venue or your place of business shut down, which would happen. if there's
Sure.
transmission. So sort of gently reminding them of that is a very good argument because it speaks to money. And in a lot of cases, that's what they need to hear, how it's going to impact them potentially financially.
I'd like to just make a comment on Camille's social distancing tango. It was a funny situation, just a quick story. I had propane delivered to my house, fuel yesterday, and it's a tank truck and the tank's out back. So I was home, I went outside and I was masked up and I went outside to say hello to the driver and make sure they had what they wanted. And he kept walking towards me and he was not wearing a mask. And I kept backing up. And I kept backing up until literally I was backing up into the woods, because he just didn't get it. I said, wait there. And I just kept coming. Okay, that's it. Do we have any other management people here who want to talk about the way that they're handling, not necessarily enforcement, but, information and awareness? Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Want me to continue on?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what I'm going to get into next is our suicide prevention initiative. And the focus of this is really how you can be the one to step in and help save a life. Obviously, a lot of things I talk about are applicable to you, but it's about being aware and helping others. And I did one of these with the executive director of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline a few months ago, and he said something that really stuck with me. More suicides are prevented by someone close to the person than by a mental health professional. So it means we're all the front line. We really can make a difference. So what's the first step? The first step, of course, is to know the warning signs. And I'll talk about those in a second. But what I want you to know is that these are available on the website for download, these posters. We made them a really simple design so they could be printed out on a printer in a production office or at home. They're available in multiple languages, multiple sizes. Make sure you get the US one if you're from the US. The difference is that the US one cites the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the Canadian one refers to Crisis Services Canada. So pick the correct one. But what are the warning signs of suicide? A lot of them are pretty obvious, right? Someone's openly talking about wanting to kill oneself. But maybe you come up on them doing a search on their computer and they're looking at ways to self-harm. A lot of them are going to be particularly difficult now during the pandemic. This referring to others being better off without them, sort of feelings of shame or being a burden to others. For people who are used to providing for themselves or their families, to all of a sudden not be able to do that, not be able to pay the rent or buy food, can bring on tremendous feelings of guilt and shame. So you want to be really aware if you hear someone talking about that kind of thing. Things like acting anxious or agitated, behaving recklessly, of course, is a big one. Increasing use of alcohol or drugs, those are already problems in our industry. We know that. People are doing so even more. People sleeping too little or too much. I've had close friends tell me they just don't want to get out of bed in the morning. So you want to encourage someone. They don't have to have a long list of things they have to get done that day. Make yourself promise that you'll get out of bed, take a shower, make your bed, and have breakfast. And if you accomplish that, good. You could check 4 things off your list and it's a good start on the day. So one of the things I want to talk about, because it's probably the most missed sign, is wrapping up loose ends. And I've been hearing stories across the country of stagehands who began giving away their tools and no one picked up on it. Right? The only reason for a stagehand or whoever, a costumer, whoever it may be, to give away their tools is either they're retiring or they're going into a different industry. If someone starts giving away their tools and that's not happening, find out why. What's going on with them? That's really an important one. Saying goodbye to loved ones, obviously. And I heard one the other day on a call. Once someone has made the decision, it often brings them tremendous peace of mind and almost happiness. So if you see a sudden mood change, someone who's been particularly depressed, anxious, all of a sudden seems great, try and find out what's going on. It may mean that they've made that decision and they're at peace with it. So particularly now during the pandemic, when you might not necessarily be with people on a daily basis, look for changes in frequency, intensity, or duration in how they're thinking, how they're feeling, and how they're behaving. So part of that is, for example, do they post on Facebook regularly? Has the tone of their post changed? Has the time of day changed? All those kinds of things, keep an eye on. And if you see changes, find out what's going on with them. So what do you do if you are worried about someone? There are 5 basic steps that pretty much everyone agrees on. Ask, be there, keep them safe, help them connect, and follow up. And this, by the way, is available for download on the website too. And there's even a little wallet card you can download. And when we get back to normal life, we'll be printing those to hand out. But what do those really mean, right? Ask. Should you ask? Doesn't that put the idea into their head? How do you keep someone safe? So we've created some just practical guidance, and this is available for download either as a PowerPoint or as a PDF. And first and foremost, asking will not encourage suicide. You're not putting the idea into someone's head who's never thought of it. In fact, what that does is it gives them permission to talk about what's bothering them. It says you care and you're willing to listen and try to help. It frees them up to discuss it. There aren't any magic words to say. You just need to use words that feel honest and accurate to you. Right now, during the pandemic, you need to pay special attention to people that you know may have struggled with depression, any kind of emotional distress, mental health issues in the past. You want to be proactive and reach out to them more frequently. Don't wait for them to reach out to you. So it's important to trust your observations, and you want to reflect back to the person what they're saying to you so that they understand you're really listening, right? You seem sad to me, or you seem to be troubled. So that's very important to do. And don't worry about reading all the slides because you can do this online. It's really important to ask open-ended questions. Don't just get yes or no's. The more information you can get, first of all, you get them talking about what's going on, and that can help ease the pressure. And secondly, you learn about what's going on, and it helps you understand how you might be able to approach them and help them. Listening is every bit as important as asking the questions. You know, always take them seriously. Don't dismiss or contradict. Don't be judgmental. But one of the hardest things, I think, is the first one: help them focus on their reasons for living. It's very common for us to say, well, I want to live because, or I think you should live because. None of that matters. Why should they want to live? What are their reasons? What are their positives? If someone seems like they've started down the road, they've loaded the gun, they've taken the pills, then call 911. Try and find out what's going on and call 911. I've had a lot of people ask me, if you call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, they're just going to call the police, right? Not true. I asked the executive director that question specifically, and he said they will do everything they can to avoid calling the police. The only time they will is in these cases. They know that someone's loaded the gun, taken the pills, whatever it might be, if they think the person has actually started on that path. But otherwise, no, they will not. The next step, of course, is to be there, right? You need to be there for a person. You can't just walk away, but you don't want to overpromise. Don't commit to something. In our survey, we heard from a lot of people who said, I don't feel emotionally strong enough to be there for someone who's going through this. That's okay. But don't just walk away. Find other people, another person and group of people who can come in and provide support for that person. You want to tell the person, I'm not going to just leave you alone. I'm going to find some people to be there for you. We asked a question in the survey, what would prevent you from reaching out to someone you thought was at risk? And it was things like, I wouldn't know what to say or do. I wouldn't know how to help them, etc. And one of the responses was, I'm afraid it might hurt my relationship with them. You know what? The person's not there. you don't have a relationship to worry about. So, you know, if you can get them through the crisis, you can rebuild that relationship afterwards. And if anything, if they get through the crisis, they're likely to realize that it was you that helped them through it. And it'll make that relationship stronger than ever. So that's really important to remember. Especially now during the pandemic, when you're trying to maintain a social connection with people, but through distance, try and set up, especially if it's someone you're worried about, try and set up a regular schedule and stick to it. And when you talk to them, be present for them. Don't be reading your phone or watching something or playing a game or something like that. Give them your full attention. And if you can, try and do a video call, because you can learn a lot about how they're doing. What do their surroundings look like? Are they, you know, well clean, and what do they look like? Do they look like they've gotten up, taken a shower? Are they grooming? Are they eating properly? Are they so antsy that they can't sit still and have a conversation with you? You can learn a lot from that kind of a video call. You have to keep them safe, but you cannot promise confidentiality, because you have to get them support, you have to get them some help. So that's important. The whole goal is to put time and space between the person and the lethal means. So if you're there with them, you can ask to hold the drugs, you can ask to hold the gun, whatever it might be. If you can't be with them because of social distancing, ask them if they can put those in a place that's maybe much harder to access. Invite them out of the home, have them come and meet you for a walk or a cup of coffee or whatever it might be. And again, because you can put time and space between them and the lethal means, if you can get them talking, you can hopefully get them past that immediate crisis. Maybe you know someone who could go into the home if you got that person out of there and remove those things. So the more time and space you can put, the better. You want to help them connect to professional help, or even help from a trusted friend, a family member. Maybe it's a medical doctor, maybe it's a clergy person. If you suggest getting professional help and they react negatively, try to find out why. Maybe they had a bad experience with a therapist once. You want to assure them they don't have to go back to that same person. They can find someone that they're comfortable reaching out to. And you want to get them, you want to be with them, get them to make that first call, that first appointment, whatever it is. Offer to be there to support them. If they just won't do it, tell them you need to do it. You can't just walk away, but explain to them what you're going to do. This is who I'm going to call. This is what I'm going to say, so they don't think you're completely going around them. Work with them to develop a safety plan. So if you get them through the crisis, you want to have them understand, recognize they're experiencing those thoughts again, what to do in those moments. Have a list by a phone or in their phone of people that they can call, resources that they can reach out to. It's important to follow up, critical to follow up. And it doesn't have to be a lengthy call each time. You can leave a message, send a text. That's okay. You just want them to know that you're still there for them. You're thinking about them. You continue to be concerned. And finally, if you help someone get through this, it's a very hard experience emotionally. So you want to make sure you take care of yourself. You want to have support there for yourself as well. So just to recap, know the warning signs, look at them now, learn them now. Don't wait until there's a crisis, because then you'll be too late to recognize it. Know the steps to take to help save a life, and spread the word to those that you work with that this information is there. So all of this is available on the website at btshelp.org/mental health. You can email me with questions, with ideas, anything at mh@btshelp.org. And I'm gonna stop sharing, Bill.
Okay.
There we go. See if there are any other questions. I know it's a tough subject, but we have definitely been hearing increases in suicide around the country. So it's an important one to be alert to.
For my purposes, I think one of the hardest things that I had to get over was I want to call it shyness for lack of a better word, unsureness about what to do, unsureness about how to deal with a particular situation that I was involved in. I was not the one contemplating suicide. And it was a long-term situation. And there just came a time when I finally realized that it didn't matter whether I was unsure. It didn't matter whether I was going to say the wrong thing. With few exceptions, there's very few wrong things to say. It's the contact. It's the connection.
Right. I mean, as Dr. Draper said, no one ever went up to someone and said, "Are you thinking about harming yourself?" And they said, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good idea." It doesn't work that way, right? You're not going to put that into their head
Right.
if they haven't thought about it. So you're right, Bill. There's very little that you can say. And I see someone has a comment that they were trained to ask very direct questions. And that's okay too, but don't make them yes or no. Make them questions that you do force them to talk a bit about what they're feeling, what they're going through, because that can help you understand how to help them. Where did the idea that asking was causing come from? Is that what you mean, Brian?
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. I mean, because you've said it a couple times and we're all kind of like, yeah, that's probably correct. But it's like, I remember when growing up, it's like, oh, don't talk to people about committing suicide because then it'll give them tacit permission. And I'm like,
Right.
so if that's not correct, why is that even a thing? I mean, are we so afraid to talk about it that we're actually trying to get people to not talk about it and stick our head in the sand and pretend that if we don't talk about it, then it's not a thing? I mean, is that what it is?
I think in the past, that was absolutely true. It was the skeleton in the closet in the past. And it was very much a taboo subject. For those of you on this call who are older, like I am, I think you'll agree with me, right? It was a completely taboo subject.
Yeah. It's also a justification. If you don't ask, if you're unsure, if you're really, you're not sure what to talk about, or you're bashful, whatever the emotion is, it's a way of saying, oh, if I talk to them, then they're going to think about it. So it gives you permission to walk away, which you don't want. You don't want to do that. You want to stay engaged.
Camille, stay tuned. Watch this space. Late this week or early next week, there will be information about mental health first aid coming to you.
That's very.
We'll have an announcement in a few days. So for those who don't know, mental health first aid is a course that was developed in Australia. The idea being that people are trained in physical health first aid, if you will. And they developed in Australia, and it was actually brought to this country by Michelle Obama, who took the course there and went, this is really good. And it's now in about 24 countries worldwide. It is a certification course. You get a 3-year certification as a mental health first aider. There are 2 parts to the course. They just have finally developed an online course. So you do about a 2 to 4 hour self-paced study course first at your own pace online. And then there's a virtual live instructor-led session that lasts about 5 to 6 hours. David, good. The other one who's going to be offering the course, David, in Canada is the AFC. So, and it's a very good course. You learn a lot from it. It gives you just a better understanding of what people are going through and a better understanding of the things that you can do, make you more comfortable with how to address someone who might be in distress. So like I said, go to our website. I'm sure Bill will include it in his next edition of Netheads. There'll be information coming in any day now on that.
Hey, Sarah, would you put the website in the chat, please? Or I can do it. Yeah.
I can do it if you want.
Well,
I wanted to, Donna made a comment and she's absolutely right. It is incredibly important for people to learn how to ask for help. And especially now, especially with what everyone is going through and will be going through as you get back to work. You know, ask for help. That's so important. Because it lets the other person know that you're open to it. It will make them more ready to offer it, if you know what I mean. Because a lot of people are afraid of getting rebuffed. If you say to someone, I'm really worried about you, what's going on, they're a little worried that they'll get rebuffed. But if you ask for help, then someone goes, okay, I can step in and I can do what I can do to help. Really important. Oh,
Thank
there's
you,
a
Sarah.
really easy one, Sarah. Let me put it in. I'll put in a shorter one that's a little bit easier to remember, which is that one.
And Lori,
That's
if after this you would send me a list of any links you'd like me to put on the video of this, I can add those in later.
Sure. I mean, I think that's certainly the easiest one. There is a link to each of the individual tools and resources, and I can send you those. This one link gets you, of course, to all of those.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other?
We do have some time left, folks. If you know, don't be shy. Speaking of,
I had a kind of an observation or maybe question to ask. I appreciate that, specifically the Toolbox talk. I didn't want to mention it when we were talking about it then because I didn't think it was completely relevant. But when they have those, am I the only one who kind of rolls my eyes like, yay, this is going to be wonderful? You know, things like don't hit yourself with a hammer. If you're using something really big and heavy, make sure it doesn't fall over on you. I mean, like incredibly stupid stuff that unfortunately probably really does need to be said because people will get in a hurry and be daft. But it's just like, and since I'm ahead, I have to be there. I have to be like looking intelligent and concerned and, you know, diligent. But it's just like, but so if that's hard, does it make it even harder to like do the okay, if anybody feels like they're a little weird today or whatever and wants to talk to someone, we should like, you know, you can give them someone to go talk to or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as kind of a general mush because it always feels odd. And I'm not the most stable person, and I'm very high strung and anxious all the time, but I've been that way for 55 plus years. So it's not like it's new for me, but I mean, for someone who really is suddenly coming up against something that's like cataclysmically life threatening or disturbing or whatever, this has got to be hard for them. I mean,
does anybody think, does anybody want to respond to Brian? Besides me?
You go first, though.
Okay. You know, I hear you, and so much of what happens during a Toolbox talk sounds like it's yeah, whatever, roll your eyes, you know, the whole 9 yards. But there are 2, 3, 10, 12 people in that conversation. And then you go about your business and somebody starts doing something that made you roll your eyes to talk about, but then they start doing it and you're there to go, wait a minute, don't do that. Lift with your knees or you know, whatever the situation is. A couple of minutes of embarrassment can save somebody's health or their life. And a couple of minutes worth of embarrassment is just not, it's not a high price to pay.
And, you know, look, we're trying to do a culture change here, as we talked about, you know, introducing harnesses, introducing safety helmets, introducing standards, whatever it may be. You know, you have to hear this over and over before it takes root, before it takes hold. And there might be one person on that crew who went, oh man, he's talking to me because I'm not doing very well right now. And he's just told me it's okay to say that. It's okay to let someone know that I'm not doing so well, because mental health equals safety, right? If someone's not doing well, if they're distracted, if they're not on top of their game, especially with riggers, you can make a mistake that costs someone their life in a heartbeat. So, you know, mental health and psychological safety is all about physical safety as well. And look at it that way. That's really crucial. So you might touch that one person who's struggling and make a big difference. They might walk up to you and say, you know what? I'm afraid to go up high today because I think I might make a mistake, kind of thing. So it can really save someone's life.
And as an employer, as a supervisor, as a steward, you have to be receptive to that. You have to provide the safety. You have to provide the environment that it welcomes that sort of thing.
Yeah,
You have to do it.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Anybody on my job site comes up to me and says, or well, more to the point, they'll call me because I'm not on the job site. But but you know, somebody says, I don't feel comfortable climbing today. We find them something else to do. No questions asked. Anyone else? Situations that you've been in that by talking about it might benefit the rest of us?
I've had my fair share of mental health issues, and I think with respect to what you were just saying about creating an environment where it's okay to talk about that, I don't know that I've ever proactively had that in mind, but I've never been shy about sharing stories of what I've gone through. And I guess in hindsight, hopefully that has helped foster an environment where talking about mental health issues is more comfortable, more acceptable.
Yeah, well, that's what it takes. As Laurie said, we're trying to change a culture here. The more we talk about it, the more normal it becomes to talk about it.
And it's not just in the Toolbox Talks. You know, if you witness bullying and harassment going on, do something, say something. Because that's part of mental health too. If it's a hostile workplace, that impacts mental health in a major way. So it's really important that we start to address that. Like I said, we heard from, and that bullying and harassment was across the industry, no matter whether you were in live or film and television production, no matter where you were, we saw it at all, heard about it at all ages, all gender identities, all racial identities. It was widespread. We're not just talking sexual harassment, we're talking, you know, all different kinds. So being alert to that and helping to quash that in the workplace can make a big difference in terms of the mental health of your workplace. Sorry, David, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I've kind of, for a lot of my career, I've always been the odd duck out. And so saying something and I get just brushed off, or it's laughed at, or even worse. So I've just shut up. And what to do about that, I'm, you know, having been through a bunch of this stuff and the counseling at the OSI clinic and stuff like that, and it's really difficult.
It's going to take a culture change.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen overnight, folks.
No.
It's going to take a culture change. There's a huge stigma on mental health. So, you know, it has to start with each person, but it's going to take time.
Yeah. There are 18 people in this room who are going to walk away from here with a better awareness. They're going to take some little component of what we've talked about today and take it to their work environment whenever they get to go back to their work environment. And that's going to, you know, ripple out in each one of those little micro environments. That's how you change a culture.
How you change a culture, exactly. And you know, part of it will happen as a generational shift. Because we find that younger people tend to be a little more open to it, open to talking about mental health, open to addressing it. So part of it will happen as there's a generational shift in the industry. So it's a combination of things, but tremendous leadership can be shown by older folks in the industry leading that way. talking about it. So many of you are in leadership positions that you can really have an impact.
Yep. And you don't need to be in a leadership position.
True.
You just need to be present.
Yeah. Very true.
Well, I'll point out that I'm ex-military, and been sort of in that position, and then also been the one that's been in in a culture where everyone has to speak up, and then you come into stage, and some places that works and some places that doesn't, and that sort of has led to being the odd duck out.
I think the key here, David, is to not take an individual setback as a general setback. Yeah, you were in a situation where you said something and they shut you down. That doesn't mean that you take that at the next, the next job site, the next load in, whatever. You start over fresh. You just keep starting over fresh.
Yeah,
It's
out
not
here
easy.
that doesn't happen so much,
Yeah.
because it carries from call to call to call to call.
Right. Well, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
It
Yeah,
takes
there
time.
you go.
I mean, for the women on the call, the older women on the call, sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone, but think about when you first started in the industry and the amount of harassment and prejudice and stuff, and how few women there were in the industry. And yes, it still exists, but boy, there are way more women in the industry now than there were 20, 30, 40 years ago, in way, much greater variety of positions. Yes, harassment still goes on, but it's less, I think. But it took a long time, right? These things don't happen with one person or overnight, but the more people that are concerned about them, the more people that are fighting for them, the more people working on them, is what it takes to make a culture change.
Okay. I think we've reached.
Brian?
Yeah, I had one more observation, and it kind of goes back to the women in the culture and abuse and harassment and stuff. And and I don't know where I first heard this, but it gets repeated a lot. But silence silence is construed as tacit approval or even permission. So even when you don't want to, I have a ton of white nationalist people I work around, and they say some pretty offensive stuff. And I'm sitting there going did you just, oh my God, you really just say that out loud? Okay. So I'm like, okay, guys, that's not fair. We shouldn't be using that kind of language unless you want to go to the wrong building and end up with no job. And the same thing with people who are actually having problems. If you're going to make fun of someone who says, hey, I'm having a little trouble today, it's like, someone has to do it, or it will be taken as approval. So I don't know, maybe I've just convinced myself that gives me an excuse to be even more tactless than I normally would be, but it works for me. But it's hard, even though I know I'm doing it and why I'm doing it. It's really freaking hard.
Sure.
But someone has to, because if no one says anything, it's the old Pastor Niemöller thing. When they came for so-and-so, I said nothing because I wasn't that person. Eventually they're going to come for you. The question is when. So if everybody's safe, if the least person is safe, then we're all safe. The least person's not safe, then who gets to decide who's not safe and who is safe? And this applies to everything. So I don't know, when people are confused or concerned about whether or not they should say something, this is why I really respect the people that do the Toolbox Talks. Because I'm going to stand here and look like a dork and everybody's going to be like, yeah, whatever, Bob. And it's even worse when it's a girl giving the Toolbox Talk, because then you can just hear the guys all murmuring little stupid asides to each other and they're really not listening. But, we got to start. Someone has to do it. So
one of my steering committee members tells us a great story about a small theater in Canada where people were getting really upset when a director, designer, whoever it might be, would start yelling at a crew member. And they talked about how they could deal with it. And now if that happens, the entire crew automatically takes a 15-minute break. And apparently that happened once or twice and people stopped yelling.
That'll solve the problem.
So there are things that you can do, as a crew to deal with the higher ups, if you will, if you're not getting cooperation there.
I've actually seen that happen before.
Have you?
Yeah, someone who thought they were big wig production started screaming at one of the crew members, and the steward walked out. Dude, do we have a problem? He's like, no, I'm just talking to this guy, and he started screaming. I was like, sounds like we have a problem. Okay, everybody, 15 minutes. What? I didn't call a break. If you're yelling at my crew members, we have a problem, and we need to take a break. No, I'm fine now. It's okay. 15 minutes has been called. So if we have another problem, are we going to? And he literally told the guy, it's like, if we have another problem, we can talk about it again. It'll be another 15 minutes out of your time. And you can't do anything to me because I'm the person who's actually the authority having jurisdiction over the crew, not you. And it never happened again.
Yeah.
I think it was in Chicago.
Yeah.
So
Just,
that was kind of amusing.
just because this is a very serious topic doesn't mean you can't get creative.
Right.
That was a long time ago. I was like, holy crap. I didn't even think of doing that. Yeah.
I think that we have to get creative now to start being sort of the 4,300 pebbles to move the one big rock. So being creative and yeah, maybe a little bit of humor might be called for. And maybe more serious actions like the 15-minute break. But it's got to happen because Lord knows we're into an area where, as has been noted, safety. Oh, and safety. Just my 2 cents.
Donna? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, and again, it depends on circumstances. I'm not in the field as many of you are, but walking around the streets in New York City, going to the humor point, I have a black t-shirt with silver sparkle letters that says, wear your effing mask. And I have a mask that says it goes over your nose. So it's one where, again, it's trying to make it kind of, because it's really, really silly, especially when you wear it with feathers and beads. But it's really important to also realize that we have all been under such stress, and laughter is truly extraordinary. So,
Yeah.
I just thought I would put in my 2 cents.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, Donna.
That's great.
Donna, pictures or it didn't happen, okay? Pictures. We want pictures, especially with the beads and the feathers. Okay.
And I've got them.
I do indeed. I probably gave some of them to you.
Sorry, that's where the kazoo comes in handy.
Health first, safety always. Yep.
What a great idea.
That's a good statement, David. Several of those people sit on the steering committee, our mental health steering committee. So.
Yep.
And there was a lot. I did 2 sessions on mental health last week at USITT, and we had good size audiences. So I think we've got a younger population who is starting to pay attention, and hopefully we can get to people younger and in school and get them thinking about mental health and talking about it openly. That helps too.
Right.
And it's on their minds as they start to enter the workplace.
I've heard people talk about how change happens from the top down. And I always argue that point. Change happens, and change can easily, well, not easily happen, but change can happen, I think, more readily when it works from the bottom up. There's more of us. Simply that if there's more people making noise and sending it up the food chain, it's going to be loud when it gets up to the top. For what that's worth.
And one of our goals is, for example, that there be a mental health first aider that is on every crew, in every venue, on every set, whatever it might be. David, hi. You know, so that there's always a designated person that someone who's in distress can go to, or someone who's worried about someone else. Maybe you're afraid to approach someone who you think is in distress, or afraid to approach someone who is being a bully. But maybe, you know, the goal is that there's a person with the authority, if you will, from management to react to situations like that, to help people out. Whether it's knowing how to approach someone who's in distress, or whether it's knowing how to approach someone who's exhibiting bullying behavior, whatever it might be. That's a goal that we want to, that's a goal that we want. It's a long-term goal, but it's a goal.
Okay, folks, I think we've reached our version of Nirvana for today. I hope. Lori, thank you. Thank you once again. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
Okay. This video will be up. Sarah will put it up on the website tomorrow, usually around midday, but you know, I can't give you a specific time. I will be announcing the next session for the session for next week tomorrow, as I usually do, but there will be more to it. Well, just to tell you what's going on, next week's session is an open mic session, which is in my goal for that is to have people talk about, you know, subjects that we've gone through over the last however many months we've been doing this. Other topics that are, I'd like them to stay industry related if possible, but that's not necessarily, we don't necessarily have to do that. But next week will be the last one. We're going to take a break. We're going to go on hiatus for a while. I have a bunch of things that I need to focus on. And I think it's time to take a bit of a break. So I'll be making that announcement tomorrow morning along with the registration for next week's session. Okay, so you heard it first. And thank you all for being here today. Again, Lori, thank you. And stay safe. You know, have a good rest of your day. Nice hat, Stephen, listen to me, sorry. Nice hat, Stu. But we will catch up with you down the road. Take care of yourselves, folks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care, Bill. Thank you, Lori.
Thanks for this session. Made a big difference to some thinking.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Lori. Appreciate it.
Nice to have met you, Brian.
Yep.
David, this will be a public video. I'll put it up on YouTube.
Cool.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
All right. See you later, guys.